let's get this year in review started when we come back. All right. Back at it again. It's 2022. We are still alive and Jesus is still tarrying.
It's still on the throne.
He's still stuck with us. He's still on the throne, but we got more occupying to do. And we have more mission, more time to engage with the mission that God has given us here in 2022. What's up, Chris Bryan Sammy? How's it going, Doc?
What's going on, Matthew Jackson? Happy to be here. Nate, I see you in the comments, man. Could you throw this live in some of the groups so that they know that we're live, because this is kind of unscheduled. So
yeah, please forgive me. I need a little bit of help here in 2022 already, but we're gonna do better. We're just gonna make up our mind and do better. But it's 2022. Had a crazy weekend of football. I'm pretty sure you might be fully recovered. I think I'm.
Oh, I knew exactly what to expect. I had no disillusions about what was going to happen in that game. I thought that there was an opportunity for them, because they were such a talented team, to kind of potentially pull one out. But realistically, I thought Jim Harbaugh is not a very good coach. That's just the facts. And, I've seen enough of him, particularly against Ohio State and Michigan State, where these teams seem to really scheme and play and coach well versus us. And we seem to have no clue when we're playing teams like that. So, yeah, I knew we were talented. That's why we beat a really good Ohio State team this year. But I also knew that we were coached poorly, and I thought that it was likely would happen. So, but this is the latest in the year. I got to wear my University of Michigan gear with dignity, so it was kind of like I was still happy. I'm still happy with the year. I thought we were playing with house money at that point anyway. So
I was happy to see y'all finally beat Ohio State, because I don't know how much longer Jim Harbaugh can keep his job and keep losing to the great Ohio State.
So, it's here's a this is my philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
College football, they cheat. Okay, long before they got this where they can do these NFTs and they can make money off of their own personas. My suspicion is that these players these universities and particularly these sports departments were finding ways to get these guys jobs and things like that so they can make money, and if not outright, them getting cash payments from boosters. So I'm kind of one of those people that was like, I feel like Michigan is one of the rare places where that doesn't happen. So with that being the case, I feel like on one hand Michigan tries to do it right, but that's no excuse for them not coaching and scheming well. And I really feel like Jim Harbaugh, he, for whatever capabilities he does have, coaching and scheming is not one of them. So he needs to have really good coaches around him. And so far he hasn't done a really good job. But I think that sometimes they're so intent on maintaining the integrity and culture that dictates who they hires, and then that also impacts the coaching that you see on the field. So what it was, at the end of the day.
You talking about the fact that they got to hire a Michigan man, stuff like that.
Stuff like that. You got to hire somebody that has a certain culture, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. Hey, we got people in here in the house. We got the homie Carm. She's the do-it-yourselfer these days. Always building something on that house they got over there. And then I see my girl Wawa up in here. Oh, wait a minute. Shotty Mills. That's my girl. I text her and she texted me first, and it took me 2 or 3 days to text her back because I was crazy busy. Now I text her. It's been a few days, so now it's the tag. She's it.
We got
And then Nate, my man Nate.
Nate is in the building as usual. What's up, good people? Warrior woman, how you doing, Miss Lady? So you're probably wondering why we've brought you here. You probably have already seen the thumbnail, and this is a end of year review. And last year was something else. You know, we were still stuck with still stuck with COVID, but you know, God has been gracious. Every year that I get, I'm just extremely grateful. You know. To see brand new mercies every morning, as the old folk used to say. And so I'm very happy and blessed to see 2022. But 2021 was something else. It's been a year since me and yourself have been working together, and it's been fun. And I would like to think that you've been a pretty good influence on me. and you know.
Oh my goodness. I just realized that Shiny did text me back. And now I was in the wrong. It was me who didn't text her back after her last text message.
Hold on, what she said? I know you lying.
She is right. She is correct. It was my turn to text back, and I somehow I missed it. Like I must have like saw that like in the middle of the night and read it, and then the notification went off that I got a message, and then I'm grabbing a book. And
okay.
Then, that's going to be our first subject right there. That's going to be our first subject because that's the first thing that happened last year. And then the second, and then, yeah. So anyway, so yeah, my bad, Shadi. You're right. My apologies.
All right. So one of the major events last year, of course, everybody should know, was the book of all books, in my opinion, the Urban Apologetics book. I was able to get mine autographed when I was.
Wait a minute. Chris got some autographs in there too.
All right, was it Adam Coleman?
Oh, you saw his chicken scratch, didn't you?
Well, Adam Coleman likes to write a lot.
Adam Coleman be writing whole new books of the Bible.
Adam Coleman would have took up 2 pages if you would have let him on autographing that book. So you know that's my brother. But
what's messed up is I saw Damon and forgot to get Damon to sign it when I saw him, and I saw Mason, Gay, and Bantu. We were all in DC at the same time, and I meant to get all, and we all sat there talking for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I meant to get all of them to sign the book and forgot, literally. Matter of fact, Adam was there too. So I had Adam, Mason, Gay, and Bantu all there at the same time talking and forgot to have them all sign the book. That's Chris for you.
So I got two. Actually, I got 3 copies of the book. Might even have 4.
I got 2. I got an Audible copy, and then I got this hard copy.
So I got the Audible. I got 2 hard copies. Dr. Mason gave me one for free. God bless you, Doc. He autographed it when I was up there in Philly. That was a trip well worth it. Unfortunately, I was up there because my grandfather-in-law had passed. So, but he lived a wonderful life. Even in the years that I got to know him, he passed on a lot of wisdom. So I just enjoyed speaking with him the times that I did get to talk to him. But I made my way up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I had a few strings pulled for me. Hint, hint, wink, wink. So I could be able to at least get in the building to get my book autographed. God bless you, whoever you are that helped me get into the building.
Oh, we all know who it is. We're a close-knit bunch. We know who it is.
This person has clout.
That's right.
This person know people.
Got people on speed dial.
So you know,
like, you need an audience with the man. Give me a second.
Yep. This person,
you all set, right?
This person has capital connections. You know, as Ray Gibson said on Life, capital connections. I ain't
Capital connections.
got capital connections. So yeah,
Temperature is like 100 degrees. No.
I was able to get my book autograph. But speaking of the book, it came out in early April, and I want y'all to keep remembering that date. We'll get back to that date
Because that's the next topic.
that's the next topic. I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah, we ain't jumping into that one because that's a blood pressure topic there.
Yes, we're gonna open up a big old can of worms with that one. But I mean, the book
Hey, I
was
forgot to say hello to JP. He was one of the first people in the group, and I started saying JP, hello to everybody, but he had already kind of scrolled off my screen, and I just scrolled back up because I saw somebody else say hello to JP. So I'm like, how could I not say hello to the homie? Hey, JP, appreciate you, bro. Thanks for coming, and glad to have you here. And then I looked like Adrian was the last person that came.
Gracie,
And then,
JP, Adrian,
yeah.
Adrian Jones.
Adrian Jones. That's right.
The book was special, man. I mean, you got a little bit of everything with that book, and it just brought together a diversity of writers right here within our community, homegrown, very talented individuals. And not only that, but let me just also highlight uh, some of the sisters who wrote um, within this book. Let me grab the book for a second. I'm gonna let you take the reins.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna get into my favorite, one of my favorite chapters. Okay, they were all really good chapters, all really really good chapters. So this isn't a picking this particular chapter, which is probably not one that a lot of people would pick. Is not is not a slight on any of the other chapters. This is just a chapter that registered with me the most. That was Doug Logan's chapter. His chapter is titled. Let me go back to it right here. Doug Logan's chapter is titled "Outreach and Apologetics." And what resonated with me is his heart for engaging the people. All these stories he had from his time in Jersey, talking about how him having to get some street cred with people, talking about how people would be going to work and he saw an opportunity. So he started doing like breakfast sandwiches and coffee and giving it away because people were going to like little local cafes and stuff and buying that stuff. And so he saw it as an opportunity to engage these people with the gospel. And so, yeah, as a person who sees me and you were talking on the phone earlier, Matthew, and I was lamenting the fact that often it's not the fact that I don't agree with the truth that's being espoused in these apologetics engagements and debates and stuff. It's the fact that even if the opposing opponent acquiesces, even if they concede and they acknowledge that, hey, you're right, the truth is on your side. God does exist. Jesus is Lord, and salvation is found in no other name under heaven alone. Even even when people acquiesce to that, to me, what I don't see often from the people who are doing the apologetics is that that practical love your neighbor as yourself culture of community culture of people for those people to be grafted into. It's almost like those people just accept these set of ideas, and that's the that's the end goal. The end goal is accepting the ideas and not having them grafted into the community of God people. So because of that, for me, it's I favor when I see people who are doing like real meaningful ministry. So for starters, the very fact that this book has a chapter that highlights this communal, this love your neighbor as yourself, like this, it's more to it than just the truth propositions. The fact that this book has something like that, to me, that meant a whole lot to me, because a lot of apologetics books don't put any emphasis on that. That said, y'all know me, like we doing, food pantries, we delivering beds to people, we giving cars to Christians that are, trying to write their life, turn the corner, need a little help. That type of stuff to me speaks volumes to a person's commitment to Jesus. So I love Doug Logan's chapter because it just exuded this this love your neighbor as yourself principle that often is only a principle in word to many and not one of these. So yeah, Doug Logan's chapter, that was my favorite chapter in the book.
Right on. And my favorite chapter of the book I mean, there were so many. Of course, Adam Coleman's, that's my road dog. Of course, Pastor Brandon Washington's. But a chapter that really caused me to read it over and over and over again would be Black Church History and Urban Apologetics by Dr. Tiffany Gill, which is chapter 4. And within this chapter, she talked about having a theology of remembrance, which would also be, us doing good history, us remembering where God has brought us from, and she drew out this principle from the biblical text, how the Israelites were instructed to remember all of the things that God had done. They were to remember. I think even in Judges, um, it said that there came a generation that basically didn't know the Lord nor what He had done for them because nobody had taught them. So having a good theology of remembrance is important. But I just like the fact that within this chapter, Dr. Tiffany Gill, who's a trained historian, um, she just really brought forth the many receipts that the Black church has contributed along the way here in America. And she this chapter really pointed out how the church in the African American context is really the really a communal hub within the community where people could go for a lot of the things that Chris talked about, the food pantries, but not only that, even for civil rights issues, even for educational issues. HBCUs were started in the basements of some Black churches and things like that. And now we're kind of seeing the relevance or the resurgence of HBCUs, but a lot of those HBCUs were homegrown. Um, and it was
Yeah.
because
Now that they're stealing talent from the NCAA.
Oh yeah, I mean it is what it is, and God bless Prime Time for the role that he's playing in it. I would have loved to see Prime Time come to TCU, but Prime Time is on the mission. Good for Prime Time. I'm not mad at Prime Time. And if you don't know who Prime Time is, I'm talking about Deion Sanders.
Exactly.
I'm talking about Coach Sanders. Let me put some respect on that man's name, Coach Sanders.
That's right. That's right. All right. So we got a whole list of stuff to kind of give some final thoughts on from last year. So we're gonna be quickly moving through these topics. You got anything else to share about urban apologetics before we move on to this next one?
Get the book. There's just it's so much within it. So many receipts.
Yeah.
Some of the chapters kind of throw alley oops to other chapters and stuff like that. So this is just a wonderful book. I'm looking forward to the day when the curriculum comes out that goes along with this book. I'm pretty sure that there will be some curriculum to go along with this book. But let's keep rolling.
All right. So the next book came out on the same day. Go figure. Coincidence? And that was, I'm trying to pull it up on Kindle because I don't have a hard copy of it. I ended up with a copy of it. That book, and I read this book probably 5 times. Fault Lines by Voddie Baucham. I ended up reading that book about 5 times. And okay, so this book came out on the same day as Urban Apologetics, and this book was about Voddie's take that apparently Christians are being duped into believing that the social justice movement is anti-Christ, not inherently anti-Christ. Okay, he did concede that there were some aspects of it that he thought were fruitful, but he thought as a whole that they were bad, and ultimately that at some point in the future there's going to be kind of a shakeup, like an earthquake, and when the fault line cracks, that these Christians who embrace certain tenets of social justice are going to find themselves on the wrong side of the crack. And we reviewed that book on Alex McElroy's channel. What's his channel called? Relentless Pursuit of Purpose, right? So we reviewed that book on Alex McElroy's channel, and it was like it's months later, and I haven't picked it up in probably 6 months now, that book. But mainly what I remember about it was that I felt like Voody did a lot of conflating and thus straw manning, like conflating what secular people were doing with Christians. What he was doing, he kept taking exception with the secular people, and then he would reference a Christian here, like he referenced Mason in the book. He referenced Tim Keller in the book. He referenced what's my man's name, that the guy that
Pastor
wrote I'm sorry,
O in Georgia.
the guy in Georgia. He used to be in Georgia, ended up moving to Virginia or something like that. Big church. He wrote a bunch of books. He wrote goodness gracious, it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, he kept referencing these Christians, but he would never like critique what they actually said. He kept they might say something similar to what he felt like a secular person said, and then he'll just critique the secular person. So I felt like it was a lot of conflation. I felt like Voody had a very strong affinity for America. In my opinion, his affinity for America would be apostasy in the ancient world. It would be like him aligning himself with the enemy king of Jesus. So, that's I don't think he did it intentionally. Of course, I think that he's doing it unintentionally. But at the end of the day, I thought the book was very poorly written. It undermined itself. There were times where he would say something and then tell a story that undermined the very thing that he just said. So yeah, that was a really it was a really poorly written book, poorly argued book. And what was most sad was that I saw lots of people lauding the book as if it was this great work, and I'm just like, where? So yeah, there's my take on it. So
I'm gonna try to be charitable. There was a first thought that I wanted to say that just hit me in the head, but the Lord is having His way right now.
that's right. That's right. Keep it tame. Keep it tame.
I'm trying to be charitable. But I did not think that it was a good book. I did not think that it was a good book. And this is me being charitable. I thought the book was I thought it was poorly written. I thought that there were there were errors in the book. And what I mean by errors, citation issues. We'll probably speak a little bit more about that later. I felt like the book was rushed because maybe they thought that the Urban Apologetics book was going to be pushing forth some type of leftist agenda, and it assumed the worst about folks over in our camp, which is why the book was just horrible. But even from that, the book was written from an autonomous worldly perspective. And what I mean by that, it was written from a certain political perspective, such as, you can look at chapter 3 where it talks about seeking true justice. Now, when I look at this chapter 3, seeking true justice, it's running lock and step with a certain political conception of justice having to do with negative rights. Okay. And the Bible has more to say about justice and just a person who commit a crime getting colorblind justice or things like that. Nobody talks about colorblind justice when police officers are shooting people or police officers are abusing people. And not all. I'm not saying all police officers, because I used to be a police officer and I know excellent police officers. But I'm just pointing out that this this book has nothing to say about colorblind justice, and most folks who talk about justice have nothing to say about colorblind justice when we talk about that thin blue line. But this notion of justice that Dr. Bachman is pushing is
No justice at all.
It's not justice at all, because it's truncated. It's a mutated form of justice that's a half truth according to the biblical standard of justice. But you can kind of see certain themes throughout the book. A new religion, and that's I'm not saying that he plagiarized from the guy who wrote Woke Racism. God, what was his name?
It's not Chris Rufo. It's the atheist dude, right? What is the atheist dude name? I can't remember his name. Anyway, as Matthew grabbed that, did you find it?
John McWhorter.
John McWhorter. There it is. Okay.
John McWhorter. So you can see a lot of themes. You can see who these guys listen to and read, and it's not the Bible.
And what was the atheist dude guy that he almost quoted verbatim? That he almost quoted verbatim without quoting him, without giving him credit for the quote. Because that was part of the debacle too.
I know who it was.
You know who it is. I can't think of his name. Man, I need to take some ginkgo biloba, some of that stuff to help you remember stuff. Because lately I feel like my mind just like I can't remember anything.
James Lindsay.
Lindsay, that's who it is. James Lindsay.
So, I mean, throughout this book, I mean, here's the thing, man. If Dr. Mason cited as many atheists that Dr. Balcom cited, it would be a crap show. I wanted to say the other word, but I'm not. They would have a field day with this.
Just let them cite Ibrahim or what's her name?
Ibrahim X. Kendi,
Ta-Nehisi Coates, or the queen of them all. What's the lady named the right fragility?
Robin DiAngelo.
Let them quote somebody like Ibrahim Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and they will be having a fit. They'll be like, "See the smoking gun, smoking gun. We told you they were a bunch of liberals." That's exactly what they. While they all day long quoting the Lindsays and the McWhorters and what's the other dude's name? Black guy. Economist.
Sowell.
Yeah, Thomas Sowell. They can quote atheists all day long with amnesty. We quote an atheist. Or we quote anybody that they disagree with, or they think, or they don't believe have a Christian worldview, and they're like smoking gun. We told you they were a bunch of liberals. Anyway. Any more comments on fault lines? Because we got a bunch of stuff.
Just to piggyback on your point that you just made, chapter 6 is titled "A New Canon," right? And what he means by that is he's talking about the books supposedly that people are told to read, but yet you get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to quote all these guys. You get to read different books and things like that, and you engage in a form of special pleading. And it's just woefully inconsistent. So yeah, that's what I think about that book. But he almost got his wake up call with this book, but we'll see.
All right, so let's go on to the hold up 1 second. I got a text message.
Scotty Mills said, "Well, 200 pages later, and I'm still waiting on the definition of biblical justice, since the issue is biblical justice being confused."
Right. Exactly. We waiting on that for all of them. All those books. No one gets into Mishpat. No one gets into Yakasune. Everybody just wants to talk about justice and without referencing a single Bible verse. They just want to talk about justice. Go figure. That said, okay. So after that,
let me just read this comment because this says it all.
Okay.
Yep. As soon as you quote anything or anyone that is not a verse, they start asking you, is the Bible sufficient? And so on the one hand, we're limited to only what the Bible says. But on the other hand, they're allowed
it's atheists.
Yeah,
atheists.
They can frame they can hijack and frame the whole situation using as many sources as they like. It's insanity. Go ahead.
So after fault lines came like the tour, the virtual tour before he got canceled and dropped off the face of the earth for a couple of months before popping up at G3. And so he went on. At that point, Sean McDowell apologist, professor at Biola, world renowned apologist, and he started to self profess, think about these things out loud, and decided to take along a bunch of people for the journey. So he decided to start interviewing people to talk about justice. And so he has Voodie on his channel to talk about fault lines. And we're not going to rehash that because it was, from the book. And then afterwards, we had Mr. Slow to Speak, Samuel Say, as a guest on. And for those of you who don't know, Samuel Say is a blogger from Canada. He's originally from Nigeria, or where is he from originally?
I think he's originally from Ghana.
From Ghana.
Yeah.
He's originally from Ghana, and now he's in Canada, and he goes to a Reformed church, Reformed Presbyterian church there that's predominantly white, and he kind of shares some, in his own admission, he's heavily influenced by Voodie. So that's a picture. If you read Voodie's book, you have an idea of the way this guy thinks. And so for somehow, some way, he got invited on Sean McDowell's channel, which is like crazy to me. It's like crazy. That's like me or Matthew getting invited on Sean McDowell's channel, something I think will never happen. Anyway, so Samuel Say was on there, and we reviewed Samuel Say's video. Anything you recall standing out to you from that video? And by the way, this was probably our first Freestyle Friday. This was probably the first video that we officially did together, where we decided that we were going to start partnering and creating joint content. So,
yeah, this was the. We had done some videos on and off before that. You kind of got me snuck into a debate, or you talked me into doing a debate.
Wait a minute, we got to talk about that after this.
Yeah, we'll talk about that after this because that was fun. I enjoyed that.
That was actually before this. That was actually before the Samuel Say one. But let's finish talking about Samuel Say, and then we'll talk about the debate.
I just remembered the brother just being woefully, just all over. He was starstruck. I'll be nice about it. He was, Dr. Sean McDowell is a nice guy, and that's Josh McDowell's son. He was a little starstruck, but the abuse of the biblical passages that he was appealing to for us to be naive and to forget about racism was just it was naive. It was horrible, and I'm sorry that it sounds so bad, but I think that he appealed to a certain passage in Philippians that we ought to assume the best about people. And he's saying all this while at the same time being a Calvinist who holds to total depravity. Okay, let me just say he's a Calvinist who holds to total depravity. But when it comes to the issue of racism, we ought to hope all things, believe all things, and assume the best about people. Well, come on, man. There is clearly a conflict or a cognitive dissonance with your theology and your politics. And this is the point that I've been driving home all year. Like, it's not the politics are an issue. It's not biblical. It's not informed by sound biblical theology. That's the issue. So, during he was brought on because he was perceived to be an expert, and Dr. Sean McDowell likes the things that he writes and things like that. And as we'll continue to talk about it later, you'll see a trend here with Dr. Sean McDowell liking certain things that people write. Doesn't matter if they're from the inner city in America. They could be from Ghana, living a nice life in Canada without a high school diploma, living good, getting cash out money from everybody who likes the things that they write without a high school diploma. Most of the
again, okay, because I got to say, like, there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff that he's doing that Matthew just mentioned. We lament it because we believe that he's in error, and so all of this is kind of like exacerbates the situation. But there's nothing wrong. Like, to me, it's like, if he's writing and people are consuming and they want to contribute so that he has more time to write, that's it's a free country. People are able to make those contributions. I think maybe go ahead. You say what you're gonna say first, because you might say what I'm about to say.
This is capitalism. You right? You pay for a product. All I'm saying is, as Christians, we should be seekers of the truth, and do your homework. You want an informed opinion, right? I could talk to my brother right here, Apologetics in Detroit, and I'm getting years of experience, not only experience, but experience informed by a robust biblical worldview. So it's not superficial. That's all I'm saying. And in my opinion, and I know Apologists in Detroit is going to be a lot nicer about this. In my opinion, I just think that the line is shorter when you're saying certain things that people like to hear.
I agree with you, but one thing I have to say is that I'm just going to be as gracious as I can and assume that these people genuinely believe it. Now, there are people on the train who I'm not sure actually genuinely believe it, that I think they're just regurgitating. And those people go in a separate category. I think that Samuel Say and Vody, for that matter, Vody, both fall into this bucket of people who genuinely believe the stuff that is coming out of their mouth. I just think that they're genuinely mistaken. Here was my beef with how Samuel Say asked for money, because again, there's no issue with you asking for money at all. Mm-hmm. That's no issue if you want to do that. I felt like the way that he asked for money was a little bit inappropriate. He said, if you like for me to continue to writing, I need to be supported. And to me, it's like, well, wait a minute. You got all day long to blog and to say the stuff that people, that tune people in to begin with. But all of a sudden, once you start kind of getting some momentum and trending, all of a sudden, you don't have time to write and you can't write unless people contribute. To me, that felt a little like he was kind of taking advantage of the situation versus making a genuine, like, hey, I love writing. I love sharing with you guys. I do have needs and stuff, and I would appreciate support. Boom. However you want to do it, just not making it to where like, oh, I'm not going to be able to write really anymore if nobody supports me. I just felt like that was kind of inappropriate. But that aside, I give them the benefit of the doubt, assume that they really believe the stuff that comes out of their mouth and that they are sincerely mistaken. And it's sad to me because they're sincerely mistaken on something that I think that the Bible, all you have to do is read the Bible. And these are people who claim to be studious of the Bible. Mm-hmm. One guy has a THM, right? What does Vody have? Right,
he's got a D man, an MDiv and a D man.
Right, right. So this guy, like, you should know the Bible enough. You should, at the very least, even if you know, like, because I'll say me, like, I learn a lot about the Bible by constantly reading the Bible. I read through the Bible at least once a year, usually more than once a year, because I read through once, and then on top of that, I got my reading and my studying and things like that I'm going through in my normal everyday Christian life. And it's through the repetition of reading the Bible that I am who I am today. I don't have any Bible college. I don't have one single Bible college credit, not one. I don't have one single seminary credit, not one. I'm just well read. I like to read scholars and I like to read wide. So I'm not stuck in one tradition where I'm only hearing one voice and one narrative about scripture. And then I like to wrestle with the ideas that I engage with from scripture by finding people who embrace the paradigms who I'm questioning, and then presenting them with the questions that I pose in my head about these paradigms to see what kind of response they have. And for like 30 years of doing that, that's who made me. That's what's made me what I am. Never been to college, never been to seminary, a Bible college or seminary, and but I feel like I have a decent grasp of the scriptures, and I'm friends with a handful of scholars, and they seem to confirm that. Oh, you seem to have a pretty solid grasp of scriptures for a person of your background. That said, I'm not gonna people 5 years beyond their maturity. That's interesting. comment. So yeah, that's it. Let's move on. You got any more comments about Samuel Say video? Then we'll move on, because before I go to your video, I just realized I had a debate before you did. A month before you did, I had a debate.
You know, my point is I mean, they're everybody. I don't have a problem with him speaking on something if he has a passion. I just think that there are more robust perspectives who, you know, like yourself and other folks who have grown up in these situations, who don't walk lock and step with the left or whatever, that have a biblical perspective on these situations. And I just encourage my brothers to open up their eyes and be a little bit more objective when it comes to this issue.
I often joke and say people need better friends.
Yeah.
It's kind of tongue in cheek. I actually mean a lot of people need better friends. But me, like, I keep people around me who I disagree with, because I never want to fall into that sunken place of just being convinced that my view is right uncritically. So by having friendships with people around me who I disagree with, I'm able to engage them, pose to them the questions, see how they answer the questions, and continue. Even if they don't have an answer at all, they've never even thought about the question that I posed. And at the very least gives me an opportunity to kind of test and test the ideas that are in my head. So yeah, that to me is one of my best practices. Keep critical voices in your life. Don't just write them off because they disagree with you. They might be annoying to some degree, but you don't have to engage with them every day. You can limit the amount of engagement that you have, but you can have a friendly enough relationship to where when you do want to ask a question, you can ask a question. So that's it. We're gonna be moving on to the next topic. In February, go ahead, Matthew.
I'm just gonna say, while we're moving on to the next topic, please hit the like button if you haven't done it already. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, and let's keep it rolling. What's up, Mr. Bill?
In February, I had a debate with my buddy Steve Slichter on biblical justice and fair wages. And this debate was primarily about what wages look like, what wages look like in the Bible. Okay, so Steve came from a perspective, and this is my characterization of it, the best of the honest characterization I can. He came from a perspective that seemed to hold that market sets the value for fair wages. So, that's how I feel like he argued in our discussion. Because when I would argue that companies don't pay a living wage, he would have these rebuttals, or he would challenge this notion of a living wage, and then he would counter his challenges with basically free market, conceptually free market as kind of the grounding for the grounding ethos for wages. And I would push back, and I would say, well, what if the market drives wages down really low? Like, what happens if a bunch of companies, like, the reason that in America monopolies are illegal is because if one company gains too much power, they'll be able to oppress people. That's the simplest way to put it. If you own a monopoly and there's no competition, there's no parity, there's nobody challenging you on how you can utilize or leverage your corner of the market, then you have the potential to exploit and oppress. You can take a simple object or a simple service and charge a ridiculous amount of money for it because there's no competition. So to prevent this type of activity from happening, this phenomenon, which would be categorized as oppression or exploitation, we have antitrust laws, we have anti-monopoly laws, right? So I'm saying those same principles should apply to wages. I'm saying that, hey, I don't believe that there should be a minimum wage, because every business model is different. And based on the business model, the expenses and things like that, some companies won't be able to hire anybody because their business model doesn't generate enough revenue to pay a living wage. And with that being the case, so I don't think there should be a minimum wage. But I do think that there should be a guiding principle, at the very least among Christians, in the way that we practice business and the way that we advocate in our society, that employees should be paid a wage that encourages human flourishing, that facilitates people to be able to flourish, rather than to pay them the minimum amount of money that you can pay them, and you as the proprietor of the business making the maximum amount of profits, and there not being some immorality in that. So you can go back and watch the debate. I'm not going to rehash it. I did want to kind of highlight what I was actually saying in the debate, because I know it's a little bit complicated on the surface, because there aren't any hard line rules, and that's really what a lot of people want. They want hard line rules. Minimum wage. What's the minimum wage? It's $30 an hour. And I don't think that that's appropriate. What I think is appropriate is to say, okay, what is the average cost of living? And what I did is I looked at the U.S. Census data. I pointed out the fact that the data is skewed because the top 2% of people earn such a high percentage of income that excuse the median income. And if you really rip them off, the median income is much lower than what it looks like it actually is. And then I also pointed out the median income and showed how the least expensive place to live in the country, which at the time was Toledo, Ohio, that a person could barely get by on what is classified as poverty in America. So I was just basically showing how our social economic ethics are out of whack, which is what you expect when sinners are running the show. And so my argument was that Christians should, as the Bible espouses, love our neighbor as ourselves, and the way we love our neighbor as ourselves, because the Bible talks a lot about wages in the Bible. We should recognize that a fair living wage or a flourishing wage is the way that we should model and the way that we should advocate. So that's the simplest way for me to put my debate. With that said, Matthew, did you have any thoughts from my debate before we turn to your debate?
I mean, I enjoyed it, and I like how you pretty much snatched the ground from under most of your objectors, because they're looking for you to for you to depend on the government to get it done. That's what they're looking for, so they can basically call you a leftist. And you don't ever give them that ground. Now, me personally, I don't care, because I don't think that the Bible. I don't think that. I think that part of being a Christian is having the ability to live in with any type of government. I don't think Romans 13 demonstrates the type of government that they say should be there. I think that when they appeal to Romans 13 as just for having a big military, which, I don't want to go into that subject, because we just keep spending money on military, but let everybody else starve. But nobody has anything to say about how we're going to pay for military spending. That's another talk for another day. But I like your strategy, because you appeal to basically the moral law of God. And like I said, I've heard you also give other talks on greed and the biblical use of money, which is stewardship. Sometimes I think that here in America we lived with a double theory of truth, as Nancy Pearcey called the upper story and a lower story theory of truth. Somehow, some way, we think that our money is our money and God is in heaven and He just watches over our souls, and this, and we separate the two. But the truth of the matter is they both go hand in hand. Your relationship with your neighbor is connected to your relationship with God. And I think that you demonstrated in your debate that really well. And I'm going to try to re-upload the debate, because I think it was a good debate. I think people should check it out. And looking forward to more debates with those brothers.
My debate's still on there. Your debate, I didn't see on your channel. That said, let's switch over to your debate. Your debate was on social justice, the definition of social justice, with a local pastor here in Detroit, Mike Moses. And go ahead and share some of your thoughts from your debate.
Okay, so I was approached regarding this debate by apologists in Detroit, and at first I started to turn it down, because I was working on my degree at the time, taking some classes, and I was like, I don't know if I got time. But when I thought about it, I thought about the fact that I could really kill two birds with one stone by effectively writing my outline for my final writing project that I would do. Um, and so my opening statement and my debate outline, I pretty much used that for my final project for my master's degree. And within this debate, I took the side of the debate that the Bible does affirm social justice. Based off of every Old Testament scholar that I read, uh, social justice is not a nasty word. I think that it has been politicized um, and framed in such a way that folks who have to have a constant social war rail against it. But the phrase social justice itself is not a nasty word. I mean, just go read any major commentary on the Old Testament, and you just can't get away from it. Christopher Wright, just reading some of his work on Old Testament ethics and being the people of God, the mission of God, things like that. He's wrote several books on this, and social justice is a key theme. Another book that I've read this year, uh, there you go, Social Critique in by Israel's 8th century prophets. There you go, justice and righteousness in context. Um, that phrase, justice and righteousness, that was a big part of my opening statement, because what I wanted to do is I knew that I would have to be biblical if I was going to do this. I knew that I would have to bring an exegetical case, and I hadn't heard none of these guys deal with Zedekiah and Mishpat. But like I said, listen to Christopher Brian Samuel, listen to Adam Coleman, listen to any of us, read any of the books, and you'll always hear Mishpat and Zedekiah. My whole thing is those who rail against social justice as being something from the left, why not engage with the biblical data of Mishpat and Zedekiah? Why be silent on it? So essentially, I wanted to present my case in such a way that, one, this is not new. Charles F.H. Henry warned the church against pretty much going into a echo chamber or isolation chamber, pulling away during the modernist fundamentalist controversies of the 20th century, really pulling back. And there now you have so many people complaining about woke culture. But the reason why there is such a thing as woke culture is because Christians, a lot of us, have fallen asleep at the wheel, and we've allowed the world to take over legitimate issues, legitimate issues, and fill the vacuum that was created by our absence when God has called us to become the righteousness of God. That's a whole nother exegetical topic. Um, and a good book on that is Becoming the Gospel by I can't think of his name right now. I'll get it for you at the end. But Michael J. Gorman, Becoming the Gospel. But I wanted to open up my statement with just presenting the issues as I see it. See, there it is. Michael J. Gorman, Becoming the Gospel, Paul, participation, and mission. There it is. And he talks about missional theosis, which is another nasty word that folks might get scared of. But hey, we are to be conformed to the image of Christ, and that means something. But I just wanted to present really the overall thrust of the debate, especially my positive case, was that God has not changed. His attitude has not changed. So the God in the Old Testament still cares about social justice from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and his character has not changed. I wanted to highlight the fact that he does judge foreign nations for how they treat the poor, the widow, and the fatherless. And this has to do with more than people having access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property and happiness. No, it has access. It has to do with them receiving their due. And now, when we talk about that, then I'm gonna hurry up. When we talk about them receiving their due, that is something tough for the Western mind to grapple with, because they want to invoke charity. And if it's charity, how could it be due to them? Well, it's due to them because if you're a Bible believer like I am, the Bible says it's their mishpat. In Ezekiel 16, I believe it's Ezekiel 16, Sodom and Gomorrah were judged because they had become fat and hospitable and did not give support to the poor and the needy. Now, a lot of people go to Ezekiel 16 to rail against homosexuality, and it does have something to say about homosexuality practices and things like that. But in the context, it says that you were fat, overfed, and
Mm-hmm.
but you did not show any support. So the support is directly connected to them being fat, overfed, and greedy.
It's a contrast and compare,
Yes, I
and,
mean
and, and they're missing that.
this is just hermeneutics 101. That's all that is. Uh, so Troy is acting up in the chat. So that's what I wanted to lay out. I think something that folks were still struggling with was the notion of positive rights, because once again, Western autonomous political philosophy struggles with the notion of positive rights. They only have a conception of charity. But no, positive rights are different from charity. It justice within the Bible, from a big picture standpoint, is restorative. That includes punitive, but it also restorative justice also includes charity. But you're not looking at justice from it being restorative. The cross essentially is restorative. There's punitive justice within, but that's part of it. And so that's what I sought to accomplish within that debate. I was able to take the take the the outline and finish my paper, although it was altered a little bit. But I had fun participating in the debate. I felt like Pastor Mike Moses was a wonderful guy, and even the Q&A folks who disagreed with the debate, I felt like they were charitable and things like that. But it was fun, so I appreciate you for giving me that little push this year.
Oh yeah, it was a pleasure. I was telling Stephen, like, me and you can't do all the debates. We got to have some other people. I don't have time for it. And then I think Gregory Richardson also participated in one and took a different approach. And so yeah, that was pretty interesting also. So let's see. After this, we had a couple of them. We had we're gonna skip these, but we had a second one on Samuel Say finishing that interview, and then we had one on Cast Out of Africa with the Glenn Beck one. We're not going to talk much about that one either. And then Voodoo on Trial, we're not going to talk about that because we kind of touched on it earlier. Then we had Dr. Joel McDermott on, and we talked about civil rights upside down with Greg Kokel from the president of Stand to Reason, when he wrote he wrote like a monthly letter to his supporters on CRT and did not cite a single primary source, effectively strawmanning the entire thing of CRT, and then along the way insulting our intelligence while referencing quotes from Martin Luther King and the civil rights during his civil rights movement, and just stripping them completely out of context, because Martin Luther King had made several comments that made it pretty clear that, according to Greg Kokel's own stance in his ministry letter, Dr. Martin Luther King would have took exception with, would not have agreed with him as he thought. So any thoughts any thoughts or memories you have from that particular conversation on CRT, civil rights, and Greg Kokel?
It's not just Greg Kokel. it's a lot of these guys who simply try to pimp Dr. Martin Luther King, and I'm being harsh at this point. I'm not going to apologize for it because it's annoying. The same way that we get mad at folks in the world when they use "Judge not, lest ye be judged" to try to shut us up, I feel the same way when they go to Dr. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech and they pull that one quote out of context to try to push colorblind liberalism, when the fact that that was not Dr. Martin Luther King's position. A good book to find out his position is "Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos." This is a book. Dr. Martin Luther King wrote more than speeches; he wrote books, and it would be nice if people could read those. Um, One portion of that book is I'm gonna look it up real quick. Right here on page 95. And this is a direct strike against colorblind liberalism. He says the white liberal must affirm that absolute justice for the Negro means, in the Aristotelian sense, that the Negro must have his due. There is nothing abstract about this. It is as concrete as having a good job, a good education, a decent house, a share of power. It is, however, important to understand that giving a man his due may mean giving him special treatment. I am aware that the fact that this has been troublesome concept for many liberals, since it conflicts with their traditional ideal of equal opportunity, equal treatment of people according to their individual merits. But this is a day which demands new thinking, the reevaluation of old concepts. A society has done something special against the Negro for hundreds of years, must now do something special for him in order to equip him to compete on a just and equal basis. So I really wish that we should, we could stop misrepresenting Dr. Martin Luther King. And matter of fact, many people within that camp back in the day, if Dr. Martin Luther King had been alive today, or we had been alive back then, they would not have even been siding with Dr. Martin Luther King. His approval rating was just awful with some of these people.
Yep. That's it. And this is we might have to go at it again because this is Greg Coker from December, the legend of the social justice Jesus, and he did like a little snippet of a talk on that on his YouTube channel, which I commented on and left a bunch of references in the Gospels to Jesus and social justice. His argument was that he read the entire book of John from start to finish and didn't see one social justice reference to Jesus. In other words, he acknowledged Luke and some other gospels in like Matthew and some of the other gospels and how they have social justice tones to it. But in his mind, after reading the entire Gospel of John, there wasn't a single reference to social justice Jesus. And I think that he just doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the Greco-Roman and Jewish context, and because he doesn't understand that well enough, he doesn't understand the many allusions even in the book of John. But that's another story that we might have to address in the future. The legend of social justice Jesus. That said, the next thing that came. Oh, I did have one other comment about this whole Greg Coco business, which is this. This is a big problem for the church. Big problem for the church. Way too, like, social media has given everyday people a platform to where they think that their voice on any given topic is equally valid to others. They don't realize that some people are credentialed, some people are more informed and more equipped to give commentary on one subject or another. We as Christians should be the people who model knowing when we are informed and when we are uninformed. And when we are uninformed, instead of echoing those who we admire or regurgitating things that we've previously heard, it may be better for us to point people to actual informed and resources rather than us to present ourselves as qualified people to comment on it. Because while we might regurgitate some things, often what we do is get off of the regurgitation script and say things that reveal our woeful ignorance. That just shouldn't be with us. We should have the self-discipline to know that people don't have to hear our voice. I don't have to say something on every single thing. I don't have to have a comment on what the president said, who's the president, what the president said. I don't have to have a comment on every single biblical paradigm, because the reality is, in many cases, I'm unqualified. I'm woefully ignorant. I haven't read anything to justify my commentary. And all I'm doing when I give public commentary is people who don't know me, or people who don't know that I'm ignorant and uninformed, those people are being misled. And I'm doing that, and I'm misrepresenting my Lord and Savior Jesus. So in this case, don't be like Greg Kokel. Don't be a guy who uses his credentials in the areas where he is informed, uses his celebrity to make a point that he is woefully unqualified to make. To write an entire essay on a topic and cite not one single primary source, not one. All second and third primary sources, and all from people who are dissenters of the idea. That's not the way that you go about representing Christ. So that will be my takeaway from that video right there. All right. So the next topic, we talked a lot about social justice last year. The next video we did was 4 months ago. It was we did a critique on part of the social justice statement, the Dallas social justice statement, the one that kind of got the whole ball of wax of social justice in the conscience of the church rolling. What was it, like 2018 or something like that, where Juice Boise, or Joe Boise, the guy who did G3, I think it was him, who got John MacArthur and a bunch of pastors together, some 6,000 odd pastors together, and crafted this social justice statement where they denounced a bunch of stuff and defined for their minds what actual social justice is. And so we went through that statement and read certain excerpts of it and critiqued these excerpts in light of biblical theology. And needless to say, we found it wanting. Here's a place where they actually did define justice just woefully. What were your thoughts from that that video, Matthew?
I mean, where do you start? One, it was formulated in 2018. A lot of things were happening. It's just that sometimes I get I'm not gonna say discouraged by how some have to have a culture war to be relevant. But it seems that some group of Christians have to participate in certain culture wars to be relevant, rather than seeing it as an opportunity for mission, for missional work. But I just felt like the statement on the gospel, or the statement on social justice, excuse me, but it was also a statement on the gospel. In essence, it was a statement that told other preachers to shut up and preach. You shut up and preach the gospel. We've heard folks tell LeBron James to shut up and dribble anytime you have something to say about social justice. Well, for other folks, it was shut up and preach the gospel. But that brings us back to the big question: what is the gospel? Really, what is the gospel? And for me, it caused me to go back to the desk, pull out the Bible, and just really look at what the Word of God has to say from Genesis to Exodus about the gospel. And once again, in looking at the scriptural data, God has not changed in his character from Genesis to Revelation. He still cares about the whole person, the total person. And the way the way that we serve God, the way that we have a relationship with God, we cannot separate our relationship with our neighbor, which is our horizontal relationship, with our vertical relationship with God. We cannot separate the two. Uh, and I mean, this and largely, like I said, this has been documented. The what these guys were reacting to has been documented in books like Jamar Tisby books. He talks about the conference at Urbana and what Pastor Thabiti had to say. It was
What Damon said. Say what we're saying or shut up.
yeah, say what we're saying to shut up.
That's
But
basically what they want you to do.
yeah, this was a reaction against us pushing against certain narratives. And hey, these guys wanted certain Christians to fall in line. But I'm sorry, I'm a rebel like that, and I'm not going to do it. And I stand with my brothers, Pastor Thabiti and others who say different. And that's because the Bible says different.
Yeah, to me, okay, I found this social justice statement helpful because one of my biggest critiques against those who oppose Christians who advocate social justice is the fact that they rarely define what they're talking about. Like that was my critique against fault lines. That was my critique against a lot of the content coming from that particular group is they never define justice. So it was helpful for them to have a statement where they define justice. The irony is they define justice in such a shallow way, it was unhelpful. I mean, it was almost as simple as saying God is just, Christians should be just, and that's it. And it's like you're not defining mishpat, right? You're not defining you're not defining diakosune, right? You're not defining the Hebrew or the Greek words in their social cultural context, what they implied, how robust they were. No attempt to do any of that. Just a very simple conceptual definition. And I thought that that was while it was helpful because now I have something in print that I can critique, I thought it was woefully shallow. And my gosh, no wonder these guys have such a convoluted way of thinking about these things of justice. Because when they say that justice is right and they say that racism is wrong, but when we point out racism today and we injustice today, they say that's not injustice and there's nothing inappropriate about that. And it's just like, so that was my that's my 2 cents on on the statement of social justice. It's helpful because it gives you it gives you an idea of where they're coming from in print that we can turn to critique. And if they're going to say that they don't agree with that, then that forces them to tell you what they actually do say. My experience has been when I encounter these Christians who oppose justice advocacy, who oppose the injustices of imprisonment, of school inequality, of economic inequality. When I have conversations with people on topics like these, what I find is they don't have any sense of a definition of the words justice and from the Bible, Old or New Testament, and a lot of their ideas about these things, ironically, are political talking points for the conservative party today. And that's not to say that there's the liberal side has their issues as well, because there are Christians who gravitate toward the liberal ideologies and their talking points are the liberal parties. I think our talking point should be the Bible. Our talking point should be King Jesus. Our definition should come from this robust text, the scriptures that God has left us, where we can have a solid foundational understanding of these things, rather than us just kind of echoing a sentiment and assuming that sentiment properly defines what we're talking about. So that's my 2 cents on the justice one. Okay, and then now we're getting almost live today. So, and this is the conversation that we just had a couple weeks ago, a conversation on Coleman Hughes. All right, you go first. Coleman Hughes. If you don't know who he is, young guy. He's an atheist. He was a guest on Sean McDowell's station. Again, we were talking about Sean McDowell has been kind of talking about he's kind of processing his beliefs on the Bible and racism out loud in front of people. Although it seems like he has like 5-to-1, like conservative Voddie Bachman types. He has like 5 of those type of people to 1 Eric Mason. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it's like I feel like you're not thinking out loud. You're pushing an agenda. That's another conversation. But anyway, he had Coleman Hughes on there. Coleman Hughes, young atheist, who's a conservative Republican, and they were talking about the problem of racism, and we kind of critiqued that video. So, any thoughts? What are your thoughts from that one, Matthew?
Well, what was unique about Coleman Hughes is he's quote unquote black. That's why he was on the channel. He's black. He has a following. He was on the channel. But once again, he's not a Christian. And what was unique about this conversation is, one, he's an atheist. Well, number one, he's black. Now, he just started identifying as black not too long ago because, according to his words, he says that there was more social capital to be gained. What irks me about guys like Coleman Hughes and John McWhorter is these guys rail against things like affirmative action, right? Only to turn around and say, well, hey, I started identifying as black because there was more social capital to be gained. Okay. They rail against things like that after they have gotten where they are, so to speak, after they have reached the end zone, so to speak. And with Coleman Hughes, I found out about Coleman Hughes when they were having hearings. I think this was either in 2018 or 2019 when they were having hearings about reparations, studying reparations. I don't know how much more studying needs to be done regarding reparations. It seems like we've had almost over 100 years to study the issue by now. But it just seems like it's kicking the can down the road. But Coleman was on the negative side. And at he's 25 today. He would have been, 18, 19? So you have this young guy sitting on a panel with several other people. So I'm like, okay. But, Coleman's claim to fame was he was a writer for Quillette. Now, Coleman grew up in New Jersey, a suburb in New Jersey, and things like that. And I'm old school in the sense that, just because you got something to say don't mean that you should say it per se. I respect my elders for the life that they lived. You don't have to have a bunch of degrees or things like that, but if you can survive in America, if you have lived a life, a productive life within America, I think that says something. That's why just growing up in the hood, you just respect those old heads because it took something for them to even make it to where they were. And so, the pulpit or the podium or the at the end of the table on Thanksgiving or those are just not things that we give up easily. I don't think that just because you black, you should just be, people should just give you platform to say. Now, people gonna do what they want to do, but I'm just saying that some type of credibility should be demonstrated. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he wrote for Quillette. Yeah, he graduated from Columbia University with a bachelor's degree in psychology. But according to his own biographical information, he grew up in the suburbs, really didn't identify with black people, really wasn't raised around black people, but he's the expert. Seems like a upstart, in the words of Damon Richardson, when it comes to these issues pertaining to black people. So, and not only that, the brother's an atheist, and he does not have a North Star, as apologists in Detroit would say. So, those are my thoughts on him. I thought that the interview Um, he had some Christian apologetics questions that he asked him, and I a video that me, Alex, and Adam Coleman did that deal with more of the Christian apologetics issues. But I think that the Christian apologetics issues go hand in hand with his opinions and things on government, because I don't think that you can separate how one should govern from your view of morality. And if your view of morality is relativistic, then you're on a sinking ship to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. My thought was, I know this. Okay. So this is how I got to talking about racism. Like, okay, I'm predominantly white church, been there for 16 or 17 years, right? And probably for the first 14 or 15 years, I never had a conversation about race with anybody in my church. If I did, I don't recall it. And it couldn't have been a robust conversation. It had to have been a very shallow conversation. Me and Steve, who I had that debate with, we started a Bible and beer at a local microbrewery here. And we started talking. So at a Bible and beer, basically we discuss politics and the Bible. So basically, we ran the gambit on every debate topic that are really popular: young Earth, old Earth, Calvinism, and a host of other, theological paradigms, evolution, things like that. So we ran the gambit on all of those. We get to the point where we're running out of topics, and we want to maintain the steam that we had from, because we were having like 30 people show up to these Bible and beers. It was great, really great discussion. We'll come in. The bar was letting us use the room for free. Patrons in the bar was coming up, so non-Christians were coming up and joining in our Christian conversations and open the door for longer conversations afterwards. So yeah, that's how we got started with race. Eventually, we had a discussion of, hey, let's talk about race. And I'm like the one black guy that regularly comes. I'm one of the coordinators. So I got drafted to have the position of, is racism still a problem in America? That was the name of the discussion. David Calvinism. Let's say Calvinism. So I got drafted, right? And so like I had no opinion. Like at this point in time, I would have likely. At the time, I considered myself a conservative. The previous election, I had voted for George Bush, so like this is kind of where I'm at. I didn't vote for Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama was president by now. I did not vote for Barack Obama. I did vote for George Bush prior to Barack Obama. I considered myself kind of a conservative. This was the circle that I was running in. I'm at this predominantly white church, which was predominantly, conservative. So I kind of assimilated into that culture. So here, for the first time in my life, I'm kind of I'm forced to kind of take a look at the topic of racism in America and get outside of my little shallow bubble. So I just did some cursory research. It was not anything extensive. It was just very cursory. I literally Googled, is racism a problem in America? Started sifting through some of the content. And basically, after about a week of sifting through content, I came to the conclusion like, wow, racism is still a problem in America. And I began to wrap my mind around what that problem looked like. Largely, I was convinced that from the criminal justice system. I read a bunch of articles that talked about the disparities in sentencing that blacks receive. And there had been some studies done that were given some controls and showed that consistently, in spite of a controlled environment, that blacks seem to get higher longer sentences than whites. I had also read that blacks seem to be engaged by the police more frequently than our white counterparts. So just a little cursory research, and then a little bit of I looked into some social economic stuff, some census stuff, and started to notice some of the national statistics about net worth, incomes. The income disparities. We make like 20% less than them on average. We have like a tenth of the net worth of them. So like once I started seeing how the statistics seem to point in a particular direction, I came into this debate with the affirmative. Okay, yes, racism is still a problem in America, and this was off like a week and a half cursory study, just reading some stuff online. nothing of in depth, not a single book or anything like that. Apparently, he did some cursory studying too, because he came there basically to espouse and laud the virtues of one Mr. Thomas Sowell, and how racism wasn't a problem. From that, my boy Brandon was there. Matter of fact, this is one of our most attended ones, and it was like 50-50. It's probably about 25 black people, 25 white people, 25, 30 white people. It's about 50-50. And the guy I was having this discussion with, he was just a rude guy. He was real trollish. I mean, think like Seiko Woods. You know what I'm saying? He was that type of temperament, and that's how he engaged. You know what I'm saying? And in a way to where it was like, this ain't the guy. This ain't the way that you had this type of conversation. You gotta be a little more civil. And like literally everybody else in the conversation was civil, except for this one guy. This one guy who I'm having this conversation with was lit. I mean, like mad disrespectful. Like punch you in the face, mad disrespectful. Like cutting people off when they was talking and telling them, if you ain't got nothing to say, then shut up. Like black people, when black people were saying. Like he was talking to black people like that, like real mad disrespectful. Like he shouldn't have made it out of there without a couple looking like a raccoon, for real. Anyway, from that was the catalyst to get me to start reading. By that, my boy Brandon was like, man, you sound like Emerson and from Divided by Faith. You should check out Divided by Faith. It's a really good book. So I read Divided by Faith. Around the same time, Jamar Tisby's book, Color Compromise came out. So I read The Color of Compromise. And then I read the New Jim Crow. And then I read, what's the guy's book that, the guy that's The Color of Law, Feinstein. Is it Feinstein? He's a Jewish guy. Right. And then I read The Color of Law. So anyway, I kind of ran the gambit on a lot of the more common books.
It's the new canon.
Then I read the Warmth of Other Suns about the Great Migration, and that got me into thinking about the historical social context. And so I bought some books on the history of America during World War I, the history of America during World War II, American history, and these are books. A couple of them were audio books that had archived radio telecasts integrated into the narrative. So like they'll talk about this, what's going on. Then they'll kind of show, they'll kind of give a president giving a talk. They'll have citizens calling in, sharing their opinions on particular topics on the radio. And then I'm going to like the World War II Museum in New Orleans. Like I'm traveling, I'm down in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm traveling and I'm going to all of these like historical museums and kind of, really filling in the history. I'm in Philadelphia, which is filled with history. One of the earliest states to abolish slavery. Right after America won the Revolutionary War. Was that 1776 and 1780? Pennsylvania abolished slavery, like 4 years. But the same state that abolishes slavery is where the birth of the Black church takes place. So it's not like racism isn't a problem. It's more of it's racism has many shades, or racism has a variety of different ways that it reveals itself. So yeah, from that kind of catalyzed me into becoming like the social that and at the same time, I'm kind of reading books like Surprised by Hope by N.T. Wright and starting to wrap my mind around the implications of the gospel and the social aspects of it. And then I started following scholars who were actually Christopher J. Wright and reading Carmen Imes, Bearing God's Name, reading books and kind of filling in a bunch of the gaps and holes of where I wasn't seeing the full picture. And then once I began to grasp the social context of Scripture and realize, the social context of Scripture, in one sense, it's highly political. It's always critiquing kings. Kings are political figures, like we have presidents today. Kings are these political figures in the ancient world. God has this ideal king that he's presenting to Israel in Deuteronomy. Hey, you're going to eventually have a king. The king must write down the law. He must read the law every day. He must not be a greedy person. He must not think he's better than the common person. Go read Deuteronomy, and you're going to see all of these ideas surrounding what this king should look like. You get David, who's a man after God's own heart. He loves God, and he never leads the people into worshiping the idols and in the high places. And he's very passionate about people following Yahweh. And you get Solomon, who kind of takes the empire to its height, but at the same time introduces all of these practices that later on continues to plague the kings for generations, to the point to where the people of God gets exiled out of the land. They get vomited out of this land, to which the land itself was emblematic of the garden, like with Adam and Eve. And the land itself, flowing with milk and honey, was the resources for the people to be this robust, benevolent community that welcome in the stranger, the foreigner, that cares for the widow and the fatherless. That there's all these social connotations to this story of the Bible, that's the foundation of which Jesus comes to fulfill the failures of Israel. He's the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. And there's three different pictures of the servant of God in the second half of Isaiah, right? And so, like, Jesus is this quintessential Jew. He lives that life. Well, if he's living the life that Israel failed, and the picture of Israel is this social story, God creating a human flourishing community on earth, which is ruled by God. This is how life will be if God ruled. This is what heaven's going to be like when God comes and does away with sin and evil. It's going to be how it was intended to be. So yeah, for me, all of these pieces of the puzzle kind of came together for me and created this picture to where I ended up becoming kind of the social justice guy in the urban apologetics community. It's not because I don't like giving apologetic arguments for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's not because I don't like dealing with these crazy cockamamie ideas that come out of the conscious community. It's not because I don't care for arguing against these cultish Hebrew Israelite groups, right? It's not because of any of that stuff. By the grace of God, we got great people like Damon, like Michael Holloway, like Adam Coleman, all of these guys who have platforms like BK Apologists, who do a lot of good work, like you a lot of good work in apologetics against these guys. But for me, I feel like circumstances pushed me into the niche of being the guy to try to help people understand social context and how social context influences theology, and how we as the people of God have to be more than simply about getting accurate ideas in our head. If those accurate ideas don't produce in us a way of life that reflects Yahweh, that reflects Jesus, if those beliefs don't produce something in us, then can we really say that we are saved? And ultimately, I think that's what James is talking about in the book of James. How can you say you have faith if that faith doesn't produce something in you that reflects godliness? And the reality is, in the ancient world, godliness was seen in the way you live, not simply in the things that you believe. And so, yeah, that's how I got where I'm at today. Well, that was a little bit of a rant getting off of that, but yeah, I did want to take that opportunity, since it kind of popped up in my mind in a moment, to explain how I got here as far as the social justice guy in the urban apologetics community. So, Matthew, what about you? How'd you get here, buddy?
Well, I just remembered, like I'm a former assistant pastor and things like that, and I've often wondered what it was about the Black church before the quote unquote civil rights gains have been made. What was different about the church back then than it was today? And I'm not speaking, I mean, you have amazing preachers like Dr. Eric Macy, you got Damon Richardson, you have Isaiah Robinson writing books and leading the charge. You have Pastor Thabiti. What was it? And it was because we truly believed that the gospel was holistic, and that starts with rejecting what Nancy Pearcey called the sacred and secular dichotomy. In other words, sacred secular dichotomy is almost the sense where you believe that God has come to save your soul, but Hopefully you'll do the best that you can while you're down here, and it's all about going to heaven, when the truth of the matter is everything belonged to Jesus.
Amen.
Everything. I think in Colossians it says that by the blood of his cross, he's reconciling all things, both created, seen and unseen, both things in heaven and things on earth. All of those things belong to Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He's the ruler of it all. So for me, I wanted to get away from this truncated gospel. One where the gospel was said to only be the plan of salvation. And the truth of the matter is, that is not the gospel. Salvation is a benefit of the gospel, but it's not the gospel. Salvation is a consequence of the gospel, but it's not the gospel per se. The gospel is about King Jesus. He's the saving king, and he's ruling also through his church as well. And we are his ambassadors, and God cares about justice. If Jesus is the image of the invisible God, and God in the Old Testament cared about these issues pertaining to justice, well, how come I'm hearing from certain preachers in certain churches that all of a sudden God has somewhat changed? It seems to me almost like the heresy of Marcionism, to posit some type of change within God. I mean, I think it was Marcion who went and just really butchered the New Testament, really looking for. He rejected certain gospels, and I think that he cut out most of the Old Testament references um, in Luke, but he really sought to cut up the Old Testament references in Luke and Paul. But he there was a reason why why
That man
heretic,
truncated.
why heretics like Marcion wanted to get away from the God of the Old Testament. And for me, I just, through my reading of the scriptures, and through having wonderful people in my life, and kind of reading a lot of the same books that you have read, and some of those books, what the King Jesus Gospel, that was one right there. Can't go
That
wrong
was a
with
good
that.
one. That was a good one.
And then, if you're gonna read the King Jesus Gospel, you should pair it up with his running mate,
Gospel by
Matthew
allegiance,
Pace, Gospel Allegiance. And so, um, I just don't want to be guilty of preaching a truncated gospel. And the truth of the matter is, people are indeed craving the full gospel message. And what I mean by that, you see people getting into all types of spirituality. There's a God-sized hole in the hearts of a lot of people, that different things that they're getting into uh, is not going to satisfy. But I think that once the full gospel is preached, it can change lives. I really believe that, and that's why I do it. I love to engage with atheists. I love to engage in the abstract thought and things like that. I like writing papers, to be perfectly honest. Apologetic method is one of my favorite subjects. But at the end of the day, uh, it's more to it than that. It's more to it than just abstract thought. It's way more to it. It's way more to it, and that's what I try to remember.
You mentioned Nancy Pierce a couple of times. Nancy got that from Francis Schaeffer. I
Yeah.
think, if memory serves me correct, she was at La Brea. I know
Yep.
Greg Coco was at La Brea. I think she was at La Brea too. But yeah, I remember reading first about that in How Then Shall We Live? The
Mhm.
upper and lower story. And yeah, so yeah, I actually appreciate Francis Schaeffer. That book really had a profound effect on me. It was one of those um at the place I was at the time when I read it, it was like revolutionary. It really got me to thinking. It's what drives in me now. Like when you hear me sing a lot of music, like a lot of people will hear me like rap secular music lyrics and they'll go, ooh, that's unchristian. And it's like, well, no, all truth is God's truth. And if you actually pay attention to the actual lyrics that I actually rap, I never rap meaningless lyrics. Like, you won't hear me rapping lyrics that are dehumanizing. You usually you'll hear me, what you hear me rapping are lyrics that are thought provoking, and that if you take them out of context, meaning out of context of the song, and you take them at face value, they say something that should get you to think, to introspect, to outrospect, and to really grow in God's grace and grow towards God instead of grow away from God. And ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm trying to plant the seed in people's head to where, by some chance, if they hear that song in the future, it'll trigger this truth that I'm associating with it. So yeah, that's why I quote a lot of rap music, pop culture. I quote a lot of movie lines. It's why I have such a grand appreciation for cinema, a grand appreciation for music, a grand appreciation for various other forms of art, and even sports, you know, because I think all of these things at the end of the day, to some degree, reveal this image of God. It reveals in us the capacity for us to participate in this image of God calling, for us to be representatives of God and rule and cultivate in the earth in the ways that God has called us to, both in righteousness and justice. So yeah, for me, that's a big part of the reason. How Then Shall We Live is a big part of the reason why I even have an appreciation for art. If you go to my Facebook page, if you're friends with me on Facebook page, and if you look at my picture at the top, usually my picture at the top is Renaissance art, and it's Renaissance art because of How Then Shall We Live. When I read that book and I would hear about the stories behind the various art renderings, I thought, oh, this is great. I love that concept. I'm going to put this piece of art up, and either people will ask me about it or they'll Google search it and they'll realize, oh, that's Adoration of the Lamb. Oh, that's that's I forget the name of some of the other ones, but yeah, like, and they all say so much, or they all have so much meaning that we just aren't aware of because we just don't have a common appreciation for art in our time today, at least not like they did at the Renaissance time, where they spent their time, their energy trying to produce things that glorify God, which I think is awesome.
Awesome.
So as we're approaching 2 hours, and we should probably cut this short. And I think we can come back and do a second book review if we have time, if we don't jump into some other videos before then. But just in case we don't, why don't you throw out a book or two that you read this year that had a profound impact on you outside of the Bible? And then a third thing is any idea, any principle, any passage of scripture, something from scripture that really hit you this past year. So a book or two, and some comments, some review on that book, and then some passage of scripture or some idea from scripture that really stood out to you this year.
Okay. I haven't finished this book, but I've read almost 500 pages within 2 weeks. And that's Evangelical Theology by Michael F. Byrd. Okay. I already showed you guys the King Jesus Gospel and Gospel Allegiance. What I like about this systematic theology is he does. Michael Byrd is a biblical theologian and a New Testament scholar, and you can see that in his writing. And what he tries to do is do a systematic theology tailored around the gospel. And I think that this is refreshing. I don't think that there's anyone like it out there. I have a lot of friends who, they'll read systematic theology, but, they kind of, because at the end of the day, systematic theologies are what we do. Systematic theologies are not revelation. It's just our best attempt to categorize and systematize certain biblical themes and subjects within the Bible. But what I like about this book is he does his best to center everything within his systematic theology around the gospel. And furthermore, he even it's the book is so refreshing in that he also engages with other forms of theology, like liberation theology, or Karl Barth, things like that. So I say get it, check it out. I think it's refreshing. I think that he does justice to the enterprise of systematic theology. I think that he does a good job of, according to most of the things that I've read, a good job of seeking to define the gospel correctly. So check it out. Another book is this book right here. That's right, Urban Apologetics. Uh, read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times. Go check out several different chapters. This book right here is almost like an encyclopedia, because you just never know who you might be talking to. You might be talking to one of them bean pie sellers that's coming by your house
bean pies are delicious, by the way.
they coming by your house with the final call, and you might want to sit down and have a talk with them, and you might want to give a few books away. I mean, I've seen several of my brothers out there on the block giving these books away. Gave a few to gave some to a few Hebrew Israelites and things like that. So Urban Apologetics. Once again, do yourself a favor. Go read some of Dr. Martin Luther King's writings. He was a genius. He was an excellent writer. In a lot of now, let me just keep it real. You might think that he was a critical race theorist if you don't watch it. That's another talk for another day. But once again, be informed, read for yourself. I want to inspire a culture of reading. Now, I want to be a doer too. I don't want to just get fat off of knowledge and things like that, but I want to be a doer. But by all means, check out some of Dr. Martin Luther King's old writings. Where do we go from here, Castle? I think that's probably one of his best books, in my opinion. And last but not least, I don't want to PO nobody with this book, but I have been reading this by Carl Anderson. But
wait a minute.
White Rage. Now, don't let the title get you hung up. It's nothing. Carl Anderson is a historian. She is not a critical race theorist or a critical whiteness studies type of lady or anything like that. She's a trained historian. And that book right there really documents the process or the tension of when it comes to our nation of, hey, okay, well, slavery ended, here comes Reconstruction and all of the issues that happened during Reconstruction. Here comes the Black codes. Here comes here comes Jim Crow. Well, when blacks tried to go up to the north to seek a better life, you had folks stopping trains and things like that, forcing black folks off the trains, ultimately locking them into these systems of oppression by force.
Yep.
What about the war on drugs, right? Well, before I get to the war on drugs, wasn't everything great after the civil rights movement? No, because as soon as Nixon got in there, he started going after Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society, also appointing some of his justices. And then again, you start seeing white flight and how that plays into how schools and things are funded. Then you start seeing some of these school cases coming before the Supreme Court, and Derek Bell,
his own appointees. That remember, Nixon is the Moynihan Report. Remember that's an appointee by Nixon's administration. Remember, Nixon is Romney. Romney, the governor of or the former governor of Massachusetts. He's the son of the former head of housing. He's the guy who Romney stepped down because Nixon would not enforce the law when when builders, because at the time when they're having a big housing boom, were not toward the end of the big housing boom, where builders were not following the laws in properly allowing people of color to purchase houses. They were finding ways to circumvent the part of them getting the money from the government was for them building houses that would accommodate African Americans. And so what they would do is they would take this money that they pledged to create housing for African Americans and then find ways to break the rules and prevent African Americans from moving in. Romney tried to stop this and eventually stepped down from his appointed position because he said, I have no power. I can't do anything, because he wanted to enforce the laws, and Nixon's administration wouldn't allow him to, even though he was appointed by them. So yeah, that was Richard Nixon. There's a lot of explicit evidence to the racist attitudes and policies that came out of the Nixon administration. And then the Nixon, he's what, the Southern strategy. He's the war. He's the war law and order, right? He's the law and order guy, right? Mm-hmm. Bill Clinton popularized the Southern strategy. The Southern strategy became a strategy during the Richard Nixon administration. So yeah, there's a lot of very evidence. And then Richard Nixon's own, campaign manager came out and ratted him out in the New York Times about the Southern strategy.
Yeah, so, once again, do your research. But she documents not only what happened during Nixon's administration, but even the civil rights rollbacks. Because see, everybody want to pretend like after civil rights legislation, was signed, that it was over. It was a done deal. Well, no. America has been kicking and screaming along the way for a long time. Every time we've tried to take one step forward, we took 7 steps back and somehow mutated or figured out some insidious way to fight up against doing true justice. So you had not only the civil rights rollbacks with Nixon and his appointees and his administration, but you had more civil rights rollbacks to come with Ronald Reagan, with that racist Ronald Reagan. And then, like I said, Bill Clinton is no flower. He's no friend as well. So you had issues even with him. And the book is a good book. Like I said, a lot of people are not going to read it because of the title. But hey, Dr. Carl Anderson, she documents quite a few things, even how drugs got over here. And Ronald Reagan, it was on his watch, and he didn't do anything about it, but he benefited from it.
Yeah, it was the Iran-Contra affair.
Yep.
That's to me, it's like America has intelligence on Russia, on China, on Iran. We got intelligence, but we don't know that we giving guns to the Contras to give to the Iranians and allowing the Contras to ship drugs into our country. We don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you go sell that to somebody else. Sell that bill against somebody else. Don't get me started on that. Anyway, what about Bible? Anything from the Bible that kind of stood out to you during your studies?
Bible, like I said, taking that debate was helpful for me because, once again, like I said, we went into the study of Mishpat and Zedekiah. But most of all, I wanted to just demonstrate and study for myself that Jesus and Paul preached the same things that the Old Testament prophets did. And matter of fact, let me just pull it right here. In Matthew 5:13 through 16, Jesus, in his stern rebuke of the religious leaders, what he does is Jesus echoes Micah 6:8, right? This is a little bit of intertextuality for the Bible heads out there. When he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You pay a tenth of mint, dill, and cumin," right? And then looking at this, uh, that's a personal act of piety that they're doing, right? And Jesus says this, and yet you have neglected more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness, right? But let's look at Micah, right? Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you: to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That's faithfulness, fidelity to God. And so right then and there, we can see Jesus echoing what Micah said, and Jesus preaching the very same things. Now, the question that most people are going to have to settle is because they try to treat Paul as a systematic theologian. And that's the wrong way to read Paul. You have to read Paul missionally. And I think that once we read Paul missionally, we'll be able to see that he was also getting at many of the same things that Jesus preached, because Paul did not preach anything different from Jesus. But most of all, neither one of them also did not preach anything different than the Old Testament prophets as well. So just based off of my studies, those are some of the things. That was just a little bit of a taste of some of the things that stood out, but there's so much more.
All right. So let me go before we get out of here. So to me, the Survey of the Old Testament by Andrew Hill and John H. Walton, because there's two Dr. John Waltons. John H. Walton. That was a great read this year, and it's what catalyzed my the thing that stood out to me during my reading through Scripture. One of the chapters in that book deals with the wisdom literature, and as it's explaining the wisdom literature, I just had this epiphany about wisdom. You know how wisdom is a theme of Scripture, both Old Testament and New Testament. Jesus is known as the wisdom of God. 1 Corinthians, was it chapter 1 or chapter 2? We're supposed to be known as the people of wisdom. Ephesians chapter 5, Ephesians chapter 1. I mean, the entire Scriptures is just filled with this theme of wisdom, yet we seem to have a very shallow understanding of wisdom. The literature is there. Sometimes people read it. Most time people don't. They don't understand the purpose of it. And the purpose of it is so that, we reflect it. We're supposed to be the people who have this sage understanding of human flourishing. And that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is what cultivates human flourishing. It's the answers, or it's the application of the knowledge that cultivates human flourishing. That's what wisdom is. So if you go all the way back to the beginning of the story, what did Eve do? She saw that the tree was good, that the fruit of the tree was good for wisdom. That's what it says. Go back and read Genesis chapter 3. And good for attaining wisdom. That's why one of the reasons that she ate the fruit. The beginning of the story talks about wisdom. Throughout the story, people who exuded wisdom were the godly people. Think Solomon, at the time, at the beginning of his career, that's his thing. He wisdom instead of riches, instead of fame, he asked God for wisdom, right? So that's really what stood out to me in the Scriptures this year. I'm going to be doing a teaching on it, so I'm not going to rant about it anymore here today. But wisdom. Wow, mind blown. Now that I understand it better, I just want to live it and advocate for it and help others see it. So I'm going to be doing that teaching on that coming up soon. So that was my thing from the Bible. That was one of my books. Another one of my books was the King Jesus Gospel. For some strange reason, I thought I had read this book before, and then this year I read it, and I'm like, I don't ever remember this. I don't remember reading this book before, and I think it's because I had listened to Scott McKnight previously and kind of got the gist of the book, but the gist of it doesn't really do the book any justice. Um, seeing seeing the good news as the fulfillment of the story of Israel in Jesus, it sounds simple. It might sound a little odd, but it sounds simple. It certainly doesn't sound like anything revolutionary that you would eject or that one would reject. But wow, what a profound notion and what a profound way to wrestle with and begin to recontextualize what this good news is. I think that while we get the good news correct, its oversimplified forms really carves off a lot of things that implies very important things that we miss out on when we continually engage the gospel in an overly reductive way. So the King Jesus Gospel, super good book, very thought-provoking, very informing, very helpful. Really enjoyed reading that this year. And I wanted to throw in another book that wasn't a Christian book, like you did with white. What was it? White what rage? I, I'm going to recommend Cast by Isabella Wilkerson. First of all, Isabella Wilkerson is an exceptional narrator. She's a journalist from the New York Times, I believe, that's wrote a couple of bestseller books. She wrote the Warmth of Other Suns, The Story of the Great Migration, which is a phenomenal book chronicling the lives of a few different families and how they ended up migrating from the South to the North and the challenges they face and the societal challenges that existed by and large at that time. Highly recommend The Warmth of Other Suns. In light of my great appreciation for that book, when she came out with this book, Cast, it was like, I got to get it. So I got it, I sat on it, and I finally got a chance to read it. I think it came out at the beginning of last year, and I got the chance to read it like halfway through, 2/3 of the way through the year. And my oh my, does she tell these, she tells phenomenal anecdotal stories to ground the narrative that she's presenting. And then when she gets into the psychology of it, when she gets into the how these things have real world implications and impact, and she describes them. My goodness, this woman does an exceptional job of contextualizing this problem of caste here in America and some of its implications. I was just like in awe as I was finishing this book. Probably the final third of this book is like, my goodness. The first third of the book basically chronicles the history of caste in the world. The middle of the book chronicles the history of caste in America at more explicit times during slavery, during racism. And then the third part of the book chronicles how, although there's no more slavery and explicit racism, how caste still exists in this sociological and kind of de facto behavioral sense. And wow, that third part of that book was really good. So I would highly recommend Cast by Isabella Wilkerson. Phenomenal book to help you to think about a justice issue and weigh the merits of it for yourself. And in light of that, act accordingly, act the way that the gospel calls us to act and respond to injustices. Speak out. Not Isaiah, but Proverbs 31:8-9. So yeah, those are three books. I mean, I could give so many more. I had some really good reading this year. But those are three that off the top of my head, I felt like were really good books that I would really recommend of the ones that I read through this year.
All right. Well, that's our year-end review. You got anything coming up, brother?
On the 23rd at my church, I'm going to be preaching on the topic of prayer. We're opening up this year's with a series. My pastor's opened up this year with a series on spiritual disciplines, And like I my pastor every week because I effectively report to him as a missionary. He's like my supervisor, and so I meet with him and kind of debrief my week, and then we do a lot of sermon critique and kind of brainstorming about future topics and a lot of other stuff, ecclesiological things for our congregation. And so when we were talking about the spiritual discipline series, and he was asking me, he was telling me about the topics. And when he mentioned prayer, I was like, man, I read a phenomenal book on prayer. I'm like, I don't consider myself, I'm not a prayer warrior. I'm not, that's not my gifting. That's not my calling. I've got decent practices. I got my little notepad. It's around here somewhere. Yeah, where every day I write down people's names. I basically create a list every day in the morning of what I'm going to pray for. Most days, there are days that I forget, and that's a whole other part of this. This helps me remember when I forget to pray, because if I look on there and I haven't prayed in 4 or 5 days, I go, oh my God, I've missed 5 days of praying because the last date on there was from 5 days ago. Formal praying is what I'm talking about. So yeah, I was telling him, like, yeah, I read what's my man's name? Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York. He retired, Tim Keller. So yeah, I read Tim Keller's book on prayer, and I was like, man, Tim Keller's book on prayer was phenomenal. I truly appreciated it. He gave kind of this historical context. He gave a biblical context of prayer. Then he kind of gave like a historical context where he went through church history and kind of talked about some of the various ways that people prayed about it. People utilized and thought about prayer. And then there's this sense of prayer being this model of this king figure, God, Jesus, and these servants or these citizens of his kingdom, and them coming to him and asking for him for things. And what you do when you come to a king is you bow down, you call him your grace, things like that. If you watch Game of Thrones, you got an idea what this dynamic looked like, and just seeing prayer in its dynamic of this king and this citizen helped me to understand how prayer should function, as well as prayer also being, in a sense, communion. It's like this relationship that you have with God. So yeah, so I was like, man, this book was phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. And if you're going to be preaching on prayer, I recommend that you check out that resource. And he was like, well, if you read the book, you should preach on prayer. And I've certainly been trying to get slightly more integrated into the prayer. To the preaching, into preaching at our church. It's been the grace and ambition for me to be able to preach at least once a quarter now. And so I'm like, hey, I appreciate the opportunities. And now that I have the flexibility to be able to do sermon prep and things like that without trying to balance a 50, 60 hour a week job and family and stuff like that, it's just been thoroughly encouraging for me to be able to do so. So January 23rd, I'm going to be preaching on the topic of prayer at my church. If you're local and you're free, come through. Hopefully I won't bore you. In addition to that, I got 2 teachings that I'm working on. After that, around Easter, I'm going to be teaching on wisdom at my church, what I was just talking about. And I'm also taking my notes from wisdom, and I'm going to do an online teaching, I believe, on Fredo's channel. In addition to that, I've got a teaching that I'm working on about the people, the Bible, the people of God, in politics, where I'm going to be talking about how politics were espoused in Scripture, how that relates to the story of Scripture in the narrative and paradigm of Scripture, and how we can properly respond to and think and act in politics today in light of what Scripture said and how it worked in the Bible. So that's another topic that I have coming up in the first quarter. And then the third one is I'm doing a teaching. I don't necessarily have a home for it yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a teaching and record it and then post it on my Apologetics in Detroit channel, or if I'm going to do it live on somebody else's channel. But I'm working on human flourishing as a theological lens. I talk a lot about human flourishing. I think it's starting to catch on a little bit. And what I want to help people to do is to understand, when I'm talking about human flourishing, what I mean when I talk about human flourishing. And then secondly, how using the terminology of human flourishing and the concept of human flourishing can help us think about how we are to represent God better. And I just find it a very, very helpful lens that has wide application as to how we can use it. You know, when I'm thinking about sin, when I'm thinking about righteousness, when I'm thinking about loving my neighbor as myself, when I'm thinking about preaching the gospel, when I'm thinking about a large list of topics within Christendom, human flourishing is a great lens to help me to think critically and to, on my toes, come up with wisdom as to how I can properly reflect godliness in real space, in real time. So yeah, I'm going to do a teaching on human flourishing as a theological lens to both explain people more fully what I'm talking about, as well as help them to understand it and take this principle or lens and put it into practice in their own lives, and to reflect godliness and righteousness a little bit better. So that's what I got coming up. And then of course, you know, me and you, we're gonna do some freestyle Fridays. You know, I was thinking about changing the name to the show to like FR, which is like the first two letters of freestyle and Friday, but it's also like abbreviation for real, for real. And that way, when we do shows that are not on Friday, we just call it for real, for real. And on Fridays, we call it Freestyle Fridays. So anyway, I never ran that by you because every time we talk on the phone, which is like once a week to every day of the week, depending
Yeah.
on the week.
Well,
I keep forgetting to run that by you. So anyway, think about that. Let me know what you think.
okay.
For real,
That's
Freestyle Friday. I
yeah,
like
that
that.
sounds good. Yeah, so we got quite a few in the chamber. Got quite a few in the chamber. We're gonna be dealing with our good friend John from Conversations That Matters. He's on deck. So we'll probably be opening up 2022 with looking at some type of foolishness that he said. So with that being said, Apologists in Detroit and MJ Jackson signing off. And Lord willing, we'll have a wonderful 2022. Y'all stay blessed. Peace.
Amen.